Noor had never seen a rainbow, not the red that stopped traffic, or the green that meant go, not the soft pink of her mother's shawl, or the golden warmth of sunlight on her skin. To her, color wasn't real. It was a rumor, a secret language everyone else seemed born knowing. She'd ask, "What's blue like?" And people would shrug. "It's just blue." But her brother, he never shrugged. He never gave up trying. To him, color wasn't a sight. It was a story, a temperature, a memory. So he painted it for her, not with a brush, but with his voice, with the way he described orange like a sunset exhale and yellow like their mother's laughter in the kitchen. She couldn't see what he saw, but somehow she began to feel what he felt. And when the world threatened to fade even further, he left behind something no darkness could erase, because sometimes the most powerful colors are the ones you never have to see to know they're real. Noor was born with a chromatopsia. To the world it sounded technical, a clinical term buried in letters and syllables. But to her it meant something far simpler. Everything she saw lived in shades of gray, not just black and white. Gray, soft gray, sharp gray, gray that looked like fog at dawn. The world had texture, but no pigment. She didn't know what she was missing. Not at first, but children have a way of finding out what separates them. At 4, she colored the sun with a pencil. At 5, she was laughed at for painting grass in silver. At 6, a teacher knelt beside her and said, "Noor, sweetie, do you even know what green is?" She didn't. And that day, she learned something else too. That difference can echo louder than words. She stopped drawing, stopped asking, stopped hoping that anyone could explain what color meant. Except for him, her older brother, Sammy, 4 years her senior, a quiet storm with messy hair and paint-stained fingers. While the world shrugged at her questions, Sammy tried to answer every single one. When Noor asked, "What's red feel like?" he didn't say, "You just know." He said, "It's like when you scrape your knee, but you're still laughing." When she asked, "What's blue?" he said, "It's the sound of the sea when no one's talking." To him, colors weren't seen, they were felt. And little by little, Noor began to feel them too. Through his stories, his sketches, and the way he made her believe the world was still beautiful, even without a spectrum. But no amount of stories could shield her from reality. There were still days when classmates whispered, when teachers forgot she couldn't read color-coded charts, when the world moved too fast for a girl who couldn't quite catch the light. And through it all, Sammy stayed, explaining, inventing, defending, not because he had to, but because to him, Noor wasn't broken. She was just seeing things differently. And he was determined to show her the world she'd never seen, one shade at a time. Noor was 12 when the question hit her hardest, not from a bully, not from a stranger, but from herself. Sitting on the edge of her bed one night, she whispered it into the dark. "Will I ever know what it's like to see what everyone else sees?" She didn't expect an answer, but Sammy heard her from the hallway. And for the first time in a while, he didn't have one. The next day, he skipped soccer practice. Then the day after that, and the day after that. He didn't tell Noor why, didn't explain the paint splatters on his jeans, or the clay under his fingernails, or the mess slowly growing in the basement. But Noor noticed, and one Friday afternoon, Sammy came to her room with a grin she hadn't seen in weeks. "Come with me," he said. She followed, down the stairs, past the kitchen, into the cold tile of their basement. Only, it didn't feel cold, not anymore. It felt like stepping into a dream, not of sight, but of feeling. Canvases lined the walls, but not with traditional paintings. These were made of raised textures, weighted fabrics, and gentle heat-sensitive ink, each one layered with smell, touch, and memory. Sammy had turned every color into something Noor could feel. Red wasn't red. It was a rough canvas, warm to the touch, with the faint scent of cinnamon and smoke. Blue was cool silk, smooth like water, and whispered lullabies through hidden speakers. Green had blades of faux grass, soft and ticklish, scented with basil and lime. He'd created a tactile gallery, a museum for one, for her. This, he said, nervous now, is what I think color feels like. Noor didn't speak. She ran her fingers across every surface, pressed her palms into every shade, and when she got to yellow, the one that buzzed with lemon zest and the warmth of a hidden heating pad, she cried, not because she finally understood color, but because someone had tried so hard to help her feel it, and that was more vivid than any rainbow could ever be. After that day in the basement, Noor began to walk through the world differently. She still couldn't see color, but now she could imagine it. And sometimes, that was even more powerful. Each morning, she'd wear the scarf Sammy dyed with cinnamon oil and tiny sand grains stitched into the hem. It was his version of red. And when the other kids asked why her scar made a soft crunch when she moved, she'd just smile and say, "It's not a color, it's a feeling." Sammy kept creating. Every week a new piece. Some were clumsy, some brilliant, all of them born from love and instinct. He read books on multisensory art, watched documentaries about blind sculptors, even wrote to a museum curator in Berlin asking how to build an exhibit for people who see with their skin. And Noor, she started helping. She'd close her eyes, touch a new piece, and say, "This one feels like a cloudy afternoon," or "That one smells too much like a hospital. Can we try fresh grass instead?" She was becoming his guide, and he, hers. At school, something shifted. Her classmates, once unsure what to say, began to ask questions, real ones. "What does blue feel like to you, Noor? What's your favorite non-color color? Can I touch the yellow one again?" It wasn't mockery anymore. It was wonder. They didn't just accept her difference. They entered it, learned from it, reshaped their own definitions of beauty and creativity. Noor began keeping a journal, not of sights, but of sensations. What cold water tasted like after running in the sun. What her grandmother's cardigan felt like on a rainy day. What her brother's laughter did to the air around her. She called it my color diary. And slowly, she started to wonder, what if others needed this too? What if color could belong to everyone? That question would soon lead them somewhere neither of them expected: a stage, a spotlight, and a silent gallery that would bring the whole town to tears. At first, Sammy's gallery was a secret, a shared wonderland that only Noor knew, but word has a way of traveling. Even when you don't speak it aloud, their parents found out, then a neighbor, then a teacher from school. Some thought it was sweet, others didn't get it. One teacher called it a distraction from her academic needs. A relative joked, "Why bother? She's blind. What's a painting going to do?" Sammy heard them, but Noor felt it. Every time someone dismissed her way of experiencing the world, she curled a little deeper into herself. And Sammy? He doubled down. He started learning about multisensory design, watched online classes, borrowed books from the library on architecture, accessibility, and the science of perception. What began as a project for his sister became a calling. Still, there were struggles, like the time they entered a local youth art show, and Sammy submitted his Color by Feeling series. The judges took one look and said, "This isn't really art. Where's the visual impact? Is this even original?" They were disqualified. Noor saw the email. And for the first time since that night in the basement, she asked her brother if he regretted it. But Sammy only smiled. "No, because you touched it and you smiled. That's the only gallery I care about." And then something shifted. A blogger from a disability arts collective found the work online. They featured it. Then reposts started. Then an invitation came from a city museum. They didn't want a token exhibit. They wanted a revolution. An entire room where art wasn't just seen, but felt, heard, and held. Sammy and Noor co-designed it, side by side. Her fingers were the final editors. Her memory, the final curator. The opening night? It wasn't crowded, but it was full. Of children who'd never seen themselves reflected in a gallery. Of parents who cried watching their kids feel yellow for the first time. Of people who finally understood color isn't just what you see, it's what makes you feel alive. The exhibit was supposed to last one weekend, just a small corner in a quiet museum, a curiosity, an experiment. But something happened. People didn't leave, they lingered, touched, listened, whispered to strangers, cried in corners. A mother brought her nonverbal son, and for the first time, he placed his hand on a textured canvas and laughed. A war veteran, newly blind, asked if he could run his fingers across the wall again. "Because this feels like home." A little girl stood at a sculpture made of sound and scent and whispered, "Is this what pink smells like?" The museum extended the exhibit, then replicated it. Other cities called. Other siblings came forward. A new field emerged. Multisensory art wasn't just novelty. It was necessity. It was accessibility. Redefined. Sammy was asked to speak at design schools. Noor, now older, began mentoring other blind children, not in seeing colors, but in trusting their own senses. One letter came from a gallery in Tokyo. "Your story reminded us art isn't made for the eyes, it's made for the soul." And in schools across the country, teachers began asking a new question. What if we made the world more feelable, so no one ever feels left out again? Years passed. The exhibit that started with one brother's wish became a permanent installation, no longer called for Noor, now titled simply Belonging. Children came through in school uniforms, guided by volunteers trained in touch and sound. Some closed their eyes, not to pretend, but to understand. Sammy rarely talked about the early days. He never called himself an artist, never claimed to be a pioneer. To him, it had always been simple. His sister couldn't see the world, so he would build her one she could feel. And Noor, she still couldn't see color, not the way others did, but she could hear the lavender in a flute solo. She could trace the curve of orange through warmth on metal. She could feel the red in her brother's hug, even now. One day, a young girl, blind from birth, tugged at Noor's sleeve inside the gallery. She said, "I thought art wasn't for me, but this place, it feels like it remembers me." Noor knelt beside her, smiled, and whispered, "That's because it was made by someone who never forgot us." And so a world once muted by shadows found new language in texture, scent, and sound, not just because one girl couldn't see it, but because one boy refused to let her miss it. When the gallery opened, it wasn't just Noor and Sammy standing in awe. People came in curious and walked out changed. Start with Milan, a blind high school senior who traveled across the city to attend opening night. He remembers, I've touched art before, but this, each texture, each scent, it felt like someone made it with me in mind. Like someone finally said, you deserve to see too. Then there's Ms. Cho, a middle school art teacher who brought her inclusive classroom to the exhibit. She shares, one of my students started crying when he touched the blue canvas. He said, it feels like swimming with my dad again. That moment never would have happened. Without Sammy and Noor, they didn't just create art, they created language. Mr. Hargrove, a museum director from another state, came not just to observe, but to learn. He reflects, in 20 years of curating, I've never seen a crowd move so slowly, so intentionally through an exhibit. People closed their eyes, reached out, listened. This wasn't about admiration, it was about access. And finally, Amina, a mother of a 6-year-old with Leber's congenital amaurosis, just like Noor, stood at the final sculpture with tears in her eyes. She whispered, for once I didn't have to explain to my daughter what she was missing. She touched the sculpture and said, it's like it's telling me a secret. And I thought, yes, that's what art should do. What started as one brother's devotion to his sister became a world others could finally step into. And in that world, every hand was welcome, every sense mattered, and color was something you didn't need to see, to feel. We often think of color as something you see, but maybe color is something you feel in the warmth of a hand, the rhythm of a voice, the pulse of shared imagination. Sammy didn't try to give his sister what she lacked. He helped her reclaim what the world never thought she could experience, not with sympathy, but with creativity, with courage, with love translated into shape, scent, sound, and touch. Because when inclusion becomes art, it stops asking, how do we help? And starts asking, how do we invite people in, to build, to belong, to see the world not as it is for some, but as it could be for all. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe in what's possible, someone who's felt left out of the picture, or someone ready to paint a new one. And if you believe in stories that make space for every kind of vision, every kind of family, every kind of miracle, subscribe to Able in every way. Leave a comment. Tell us, what color do you feel, even if you've never seen it? Or who in your life has helped you see the world in a new way? Because sometimes the brightest colors live in the people who never needed sight to see them.